God bless you. Welcome to the dwelling place. I'm Evangelist Doris J. Roberson, and it's a pleasure to have each of you on tonight to join us for this insightful interview and dialogue. Welcome again to the dwelling place, and I want to take this opportunity to have a word of prayer before I introduce our guest on tonight. And before I introduce our guest on tonight, I want to remind you to tag someone, like us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on the YouTube. We are delighted that you're taking the time to be with us once again. So again, like us and tag someone before we introduce our guest on tonight. Let's have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for this opportunity to come before your people and to share this informative information by our judge on tonight. We just asked, oh God, for insight and an ear to hear and a heart to receive what you have for us on tonight. Bless our presenter, God. Give her what we need for this audience. And we thank you, Father, for all of your blessings. And we ask all these and other blessings in Jesus' name we pray. Well, if this is your first time joining us, again, I'm Evangelist Doris J. Roberson, and we thank the Lord for you joining us on the dwelling place under the palm of God. Well, let me just share before I introduce our guest that it's a pleasure to have a judge because the name of this ministry is Doris Roberson, Evangelist Doris Roberson, but the dwelling place derived from the story of Deborah out of the Bible. With that in mind, I want to share that the judge in the Bible, there is a correlation tonight, and you will hear the correlation of how God uses judges and the role of judges in this 21st century. But thinking about Deborah, the judge in the Bible, she dwelt under a palm tree, and she was the first woman's judge in the Bible. And her role at that time was to judge Israel. And Israel had been under a lot of destruction and captivity. And God raised up this woman to lead and guide. And you know the important story that she had multiple talents. And the reason I'm sharing that the judge in the Bible had multiple talents because this person that we have tonight, is I read her bio, she comes very prepared and with expertise in many different areas. So when I think about Deborah was the woman that was a military leader. She led Barak out of into a military war, and they were victorious. So when we think of the role of a 21st century judge, what does that entail? So our topic tonight is insight on our courts and the role of judges. So allow me to take this time to interview, but to introduce her appropriately. The Honorable Deirdre Logan, Dayton Municipal Court judge, is a graduate of Wilberforce University and the Salmon P. Chase Law School at Northern Kentucky University. She is admitted to practice law in the state of Ohio, the Ohio Supreme Court, and the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of Ohio. Also, the United States Supreme Court. Now, that's really remarkable that she comes to us tonight. Judge Logan has served on the bench for more than 10 plus years. She formerly was the chief prosecutor for the city of Dayton, a former administrative judge, also was promoted as and served as a deputy city attorney for the city of Dayton. She's also multi-talented, a former auditor, accountant, as well as a federal investigator. She was raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She has lived and resided in Dayton, Ohio since 1993. But more importantly, she is a member of Omega Baptist Church, serving on numerous boards in Dayton, Ohio. She volunteers her time and is committed to helping the people in the community. And so with that, I'm happy to begin our interview with the Honorable Deirdre Logan. So with that, I want to first ask her, as we approach this topic, let me say this. The topic of state and federal courts in the United States is broad, and we don't have the time tonight to give adequate time and attention. But what we're going to do is focus our attention on our state U.S. court systems. As she answers some of these questions, of course, we will understand the role of the judge, as well as getting a better understanding over the overview of how our courts are structured. This information impacts our daily lives. So I want you right now to think about inviting someone and sharing this video as we get started. My first question to Judge Deirdre Logan is this. Allow me to look at my notes here and ask this question. Judge Logan, please give us a general overview of how our U.S. court system is structured, and specifically, what are the roles and the mission of courts and judges?
Thank you and good evening. Let me just give you the basic format. Our court system is a part of the judicial system, right? We have three branches of government in the U.S., the legislative, executive, and judicial. The judicial branch is a independent branch of government. And that term, judicial branch, includes both the courts and the people that work in the courts. In this case, we're talking specifically about judges. So we have federal courts and we have state courts. Federal courts deal with, like the U.S. Supreme Court, district court, and appellate courts in the United States. They deal with constitutional issues primarily. When you think about some of the things that the Supreme Court has decided in the past few years, marriage rights, some election issues, things like that, constitutional issues. And then every state in the United States has state courts. And in some form or fashion, the state courts have a Supreme Court, an appellate court, and then trial court. I'm a part of the trial court in state court in Ohio. So with that, state courts primarily deal with the things that you and I deal with every day: marriages, divorce, child custody, adoption, legal name changes, contract disputes, evictions. Those courts also handle criminal matters, whether they're felonies, misdemeanors, murders to jaywalking. Those trial courts handle criminal type matters. And so that's the quick framework of it. Now, in terms of a judge, judges, their responsibility is to interpret the law to the facts presented and to decide the case. That's, in a nutshell, what judges do in a courtroom. Of course, we do things outside of court as well. Does that answer your question? I can't hear you.
Yes, that answers it. So briefly, as it relates to judges, are all judges attorneys?
Yes and no.
All right.
In the state of Ohio, Judges must have graduated from law school. They must pass a state bar exam, and they must practice law at least 6 years before they can run for any seat, any judicial seat. Every state is different, but by and large, I can say that most states require some type of legal training.
Okay.
I'll answer that one.
Very good. Well, we're going to go to our next question. How does the federal courts impact our lives as citizens?
Well, we're a country guided by the U.S. Constitution. Each state has a constitution. Your state constitution cannot conflict with the federal constitution. So when you have legislators on the federal level making laws and legislators on the state level making laws, those laws cannot impact any of our constitutional rights. So any issue potentially could go to a federal court. U.S. Supreme Court, they're a court of review, basically. So they take so many cases a year. I mean, you can file in the Supreme Court for your case to be heard. They select which cases will be heard. And they usually select cases that have a broad impact on society or on constitutional issues. Think about some of the cases that you've heard. Search and seizure cases. A lot of drug cases deal with search and seizures. A lot of stopping of defendants by the police. Those are criminal matters. But there are not criminal matters. Again, the marriage rights issue was decided a few years back. That was a Supreme Court decision. You have decisions regarding immigration. You have decisions regarding election issues. Think about some of the election controversies that we had in Florida with the hanging chads and things like that, back when Bush and Gore ran. Those cases went to the Supreme Court. So they're broad issues, but they're issues that affect us, everyone's constitutional rights.
Well, thinking of our most recent November 2020 election, how would you advise people to prepare for selection of judges? Is there resources that can help help us as citizens prepare during the election process? And why is that important for us?
Well, before I became a judge, I was a lawyer, prosecutor, and every election cycle, a few weeks before the actual election, I would get phone calls from family members and friends. Which judge should I vote for? And I always found that interesting, and I'm sure you probably have similar experiences. But I think that comes from most people are just not aware of what judges do, or they're not involved in the justice system, either civilly or criminally. So when you have an opportunity to vote, and in most states, judges are elected. There are some states where judges are appointed, but in most states, they're elected. So when it comes to the election of judges, how do you decide? So you should be looking for a judge that's fair and impartial, but how do you get that information to know whether or not that person is fair and impartial? You can always ask for information from your local bar association. Most local bar associations will submit information to the public regarding the users, the attorneys, how they rank a judge, or you can go to the court itself. Courts are open. They're open to the public. I would encourage everyone to, if you have time during your day, go out to the court listen, see what goes on. Ask friends and family who are involved in the justice system, who are paralegals or attorneys or legal secretaries, bailiffs, anyone who's involved in the system, about the judges, that judge's philosophy, how long that judge has been on the bench. There's also a website called vote.org. It was used heavily in this election cycle. But that, not only can you register to vote there, but you can also get information about candidates and issues on the ballot. There is a website called Ballotpedia, and it usually lists information about judges and magistrates, anyone who's running for judicial office. Those are just some things, things that you could use to educate yourself. It's tough when you're not involved in that process to know a lot about an individual that's running.
Okay. I appreciate that information, and hopefully maybe I can post something later to the resources that you mentioned. Going to, in our early introduction, 95% of the cases that we want to talk about, we want to focus on our state. So can you give us some examples of cases that would typically fall under the umbrella of civil versus criminal?
Civil cases involve individuals who have a dispute, right? It could be a landlord suing a tenant for damages, or it could be a landlord trying to evict a tenant. It could be the result of a car accident. The insurance company is trying to hold that the driver responsible for the accident and to collect damages. It could be a contract dispute. It could be a divorce. It could be custody issues. All those are considered civil or equitable type cases. And every state in the United States have those type of things are handled in trial courts, whether they're misdemeanors in municipal court or I'm sorry, we're talking about civil. Whether they're municipal courts or common pleas courts depends on the dollar amount that you're seeking. So in my state, in Ohio, municipal courts will handle any civil matter that's seeking damages of $15,000 or less. And anything above that would be in a felony court. Any civil matter, anything that someone will try to sue. You want to try and sue someone for slander or libel. All of those are civil type. Criminal is what you would think. Misdemeanors and felonies, murder, theft, domestic violence, assault, operating a vehicle while under the influence. All those things come under the court as a traffic or criminal matter. And for the most part, I would say in my court, 80% of what I do will fall under criminal, whether it's traffic or criminal. 80% of my cases will fall there, and about 20% are civil. And so when you think about that, anything from a jaywalking to a parking ticket to a car accident, those are the types of things that would put most people in court. Those are the things that people can relate to. And if that's your only experience with the court system, think about it. The last time you got a speeding ticket, you probably didn't go to court. You probably paid it. But if you decide not to pay it and contest it, you would be in front of a judge or a magistrate. So those types of everyday things are the things that we deal with in trial court in the state. Of course, we deal with the big things too, the violent and nonviolent crimes.
Okay, very good. If a citizen does not have money to post for a bail or or to retain a attorney, how can the courts assist?
Well, think about the court's obligation is to make sure that
You're going in and out.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Think about this. The court has an obligation to make sure that everyone has their day in court and everyone has a fair and equitable process. So we are concerned with due process. What you just talked about is due process, whether or not someone has the opportunity to be represented by counsel. And so criminal matters, if you're indigent, if you are indigent, the court can appoint an attorney to represent you. In the state of Ohio, we appoint through a public defender's office, whether it's the county or the state public defender's office. But if it's a civil matter, the court cannot appoint in the state of Ohio. You can't. So what we do for civil cases, and we have people who represent themselves every day in civil cases, we prepare a list of attorneys and options. Legal aid, the Bar Association, where you can contact the Bar Association for an attorney referral, someone who may do it as pro bono, meaning free. And I think every state has those types of resources available. You have to look for them, and I would tell everyone when it comes to a civil matter and you're trying to find an attorney, always start with the local Bar Association. There are resources.
Okay. Now, of course, people have their opinions, and if a person does not have the funds to retain and use an appointed, does that automatically mean that they're not going, that the judge or they're not going to work as hard for an individual?
Is your question, appointed attorneys don't work as hard? Is that the question?
Well, that's the quote unquote rumors that are out there. Now, how prepared are they going to fight and work for my situation?
I totally disagree with that statement. I believe that attorneys who are in the indigent, defend indigent individuals, they have a passion for it. All attorneys take an oath to represent their clients zealously. And so I don't buy into that if you have a public defender or an appointed attorney, you somehow don't get that quality representation.
Okay.
But I think what needs to be said about indigent representation or pro bono representation, whether it's civil or criminal, that anytime you, as an individual, you don't feel comfortable with someone, then you need to look for someone else. But I just think to say as a whole, because you're giving indigent representation, you're not getting quality representation. It's not a fair statement.
Okay. Well, I'm sure since the pandemic came on the scene in 2020, the environment and the way you all do service has probably impact. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of impact it had on the court system, as well as change some of the normal procedures within now that COVID is real?
Well, this particular question, I'll answer just in my experience, what we've done in my particular court. It's been drastic. The courts never closed, but we have limited functions that we're performing. So we have cases where individuals have been arrested. Those cases don't stop. They've been on our dockets, and we handling those cases. Cases where individuals are maybe incarcerated, waiting trial, whether it's to the bench or by jury, those cases proceed. Anyone who's arrested overnight, they're seen within 24 hours of the arrest so that we can arraign them, set a bond, or release. So there have been no delays in that respect. But the administration of the court has changed a bit. Most employees are working from home, where they're on flexible schedules so that we're not having a large amount of people in the court room or in the court offices at one time. We have sanitary procedures and guidelines that include opening the doors so that you don't have high touch areas, wearing gloves, sanitizing areas, sanitizing benches, openings, limiting the number of people who can be in the courtroom at one time. We've been using a lot of the Zoom, other remote capabilities like Blue Jeans or StreamYard, or also use Zoom. And so we do a lot of remote things as much as possible. There's sometimes you cannot use remote and it requires an in-person appearance. And when we do that, we try to space them out and stagger those cases. So the court has made every effort to keep everyone safe and to keep the actual environment sanitary. It's been quite a process over the last year. I've never seen court operations like I've seen last year.
So, and I'm just curious whether if there was situation that was, I would say, time sensitive, such as, property deeds and or custody situation or immunization, all of those friend of the court situation, how I'm sure that getting appointments, getting things done in a timely fashion must be, time consuming. However, are there any recommendations? I mean, I can imagine if I'm in a situation where maybe I'm dealing with a tenant eviction or a parenting situation. Any recommendations on, I don't know if there's a fast track where you can expedite situations. I just wonder, because sometimes there might be a property situation or whatever the case might be.
Well, in general, criminal matters will take precedent over civil cases, right? And then criminal matters that are violent will take precedent over all the other types of nonviolent situations. Again, if you have someone who's in custody, those cases aren't delayed. They will proceed as normal. And if you, and I can only speak for my court, if it's a nonviolent offense, some of those cases have been delayed because it's when you're working on a limited capacity, all cases won't be heard as normal. So there will be some delay. And you got to understand, you're also dealing with individuals. You're dealing with witnesses. Witnesses have called in to say, I've been exposed to COVID, or someone in my family has been exposed. So that would cause a delay. You have attorneys who've said that. That causes a delay. Okay. But as much as possible, we've tried to handle cases as quickly as possible. Again, the courts never closed in Ohio. They've been on limited capacity, but they've never closed. Some of those other issues, again, I can only speak for Ohio. In Ohio, divorces are handled in our domestic relations court. Domestic relations court is never closed. Everything has been continuing as normal, but normal isn't like the pre-COVID normal. Some things will interrupt the normal flow, and that's because you're dealing with individuals, and those individuals all have situations that might need to be addressed. I continue number of cases because individuals involved, the witnesses, or maybe an attorney or a prosecutor, have all had some type of exposure. States,
Your mic just went out.
courts throughout the other states, can you hear
Okay.
me now?
Yes.
As I looked at information from the National Center of State Courts, most courts continued. They may have been on a limited basis, but they continued. I don't know of any court that just absolutely shut down.
So is it still pretty much within the confines of 8 to 5, or have they've changed in terms of trying to accommodate people around the clock, or they've extended hours? Are they doing weekends as well?
Well, and I'll speak about my court. We have weekend
Okay.
court anyway. And so none of that has changed for us.
Okay.
Hours are pretty consistent, and we're trying to handle cases as quickly as possible.
So, Judge Logan, can you also, there is talk within the news in reference to overcrowding, situations where there are non-violent, non-criminal type cases. Is there a reform that's taking place nationally, or are you able to speak to what are some of the trends or things that are happening as it relates?
I think what you're referring to probably is the bail reform that's going on across the United States. And what that deals with individuals who have been accused or charged with crimes. And they've been set by the court monetary bond. And those folks can't make the monetary bond, so they remain in custody till their case is adjudicated, whether that's a plea or a trial or whatever. So there's been, I'd say in the last 5 years or so, a really big push, put a spotlight on this trial, pre-conviction custody of individuals. And so again, I will speak specifically for my court. In my court, we did an analysis of this and we overhauled much of our practices. We have established a pretrial service division within our court. And our push in our court is to ensure that we use a data-driven mechanism that will give us information and we make bail decisions based on that. With the emphasis being that individuals need to be released when charged unless there's some reason, overwhelming reason for them to be in custody. And I think several states throughout the United States are revisiting this bail issue. So I believe that's what you're talking about. And I think there was a study in Ohio a couple of years ago where it showed that most of the people on any given day that were in custody pre-trial, meaning they had been charged, but there's been no conviction. So when you think about that, we all as taxpayers, we pay for all of that, right? We pay for our criminal justice system. We all want safe streets. We all want individuals who should be incarcerated. We want them incarcerated. But if you look at how you're using those resources, should you really be using those resources for pre-trial incarceration when everyone in the United States is presumed innocent unless convicted? So that's what the conversation is about.
Okay. Well, that leads me to asking what are some of the things that a judge would take in consideration as they make their final decision on a case. Sometimes I've heard people say, letters of references, are written, and sometimes judges don't even receive that. I don't know if that's true, or they may, this is a first conviction. And so can you speak to that, just so that our audience can understand what goes into making that final decision, ruling?
Your question, I'm assuming your question is really about criminal cases.
It could be, even well, why don't you go ahead and speak to in terms of criminal cases? Certainly, I don't know if a civil case would be a misdemeanor, conviction.
It sounds like you're talking about criminal. And so when you say what goes into your decision, let me say that the purpose of a judge in a criminal case is to listen to the facts and apply the facts to the law, and to determine whether the state has met its burden. The state has a burden to prove the individual guilty by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's what the court will be doing, evaluating those facts and the law. So when you talk about how does the court make its decision, other than that, there's no blueprint. You take the facts that have been given to you and you apply it to the elements of the charge, the essential elements of the offense, and you decide whether or not you are convinced of the truth of whether those charges, of those elements have been proven. So that's about looking at evidence, listening to testimony. And of course, the court has to decide what evidence is admissible. And so those are the things that happen. Now, when you talk about sentencing, that's a different issue.
Okay.
So if you've gone through the process and after listening to the evidence, the court feels that the state has proven its case and now it's time for sentencing, there are many things that the court can consider. Now, of course, we have to sentence within the parameters of the law. If the law says that the maximum sentence is 3 years, then I can't sentence someone to 10. So I have those parameters. But what goes into making a sentencing decision would be things like in Ohio, the victims have rights. They have an opportunity to speak, to give their opinion on what sentencing should be. I'm looking at the past criminal conduct of the defendant, whether or not this person still poses a risk to public safety or to anyone's safety, whether or not this person was on supervision at the time of the incident. There are a whole host of things, whether or not this person has a mental health issue, a drug issue, the age, whether it's the first offense, what type of crime it is. All of those things go into play, but in considering those things, I still have to work within the framework of the law. And the law not only provides what is a crime, but it also provides the penalty. So I cannot sentence a penalty that exceeds what's allowed by law.
Okay, very good. Now, often we watch reality shows with judges and so forth, and the behavior of an individual, the plaintiff, or maybe personally, I'm not sure if sometimes the behavior of the individuals, can that have an impact on the outcome in terms of the clients?
Well, let me go back to your first comment about reality shows.
Okay.
What happens in a real courtroom It's nothing like those reality shows.
Okay, well, thank
I
you.
hate those reality shows.
Help us out. Help us out. So maybe maybe we shouldn't be watching those reality. Judge this one, judge that one. I mean, is that helpful?
Judges in courtrooms, judges, period. We have a duty to act in a manner that's upholds the law. And so you will not see judges in real courtrooms being disrespectful, yelling at people, that type of thing. Now, in terms of the defendant's behavior in the courtroom,
yes.
if you think about, the judge is only supposed to decide a case based on the evidence presented in the courtroom. And that is correct. But how a witness testifies is also important. So their ability to know about what they're testifying about, their forthrightness or lack of that is something that the judge considers. So yeah, all of that is things that goes on in the courtroom that the judge will consider.
Okay. Very helpful. This next question, I happen to be watching the documentary of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And of course, she was an advocate for women's rights and so forth. And there was a piece of the documentary, and I don't remember the situation, but just her style of advocating and actually changing the law. And I'm wondering, for someone that's out in the viewing audience, I often hear people have concerns, and just as it relates, and I'm going to use this particular area, and you can, if there is steps that individuals can take to help either advocate for if an issue or legal issue that they're passionate about. We often hear that fathers don't have the equal rights that women have when it comes to children and parenting. But there's many other circumstances that are similar. But is for the citizens that are out there, or individuals that are out there that are passionate, what can they do? Of course, she was an attorney, but she was representing someone about a particular issue. Is there anything steps that you would recommend a person to take?
Well, go back to those three branches of government: judicial, legislative, and executive. Legislative branch of government is the branch of government that makes the law, whether it's Congress through your federal or your state representative. The courts don't make the laws. All we do is interpret the laws, and then we also decide whether those laws are constitutional or unconstitutional, in fact, or based on constitutional or not constitutional based on the facts, or just based on the law in general. So when you talk about being an advocate, courts have a very narrow function. And if we look at a particular law and we decide whether it's constitutional or unconstitutional, that benefits, of course, us as citizens, because we don't want anything that's not constitutional. But when you're talking about individual cases, individual things like not being able to see your child, or feel that you have been unduly given child support orders and things like that, those are things that courts can't advocate for. Those are things that private attorneys, advocacy groups, or individuals can advocate for their legislative process. Most of those things are legislative. It's difficult to say because it's if you feel there's something that the legal system is unfair to you in your particular case, that law is unfair, or maybe that the judge is unfair. Now, if you think the judge is not being fair, there's ways to handle that. If you're talking about the law is unfair, the way that you have that law looked at is through your legislative process.
Okay.
The court is just looking to see whether it's constitutional or unconstitutional. And if you feel that a judge is being unfair, of course, you can always go through the Bar Association or the Supreme Court and have that judge evaluated. But most of the time, judges are applying the law to the facts and making decisions based on that. There's nothing personal or punitive involved.
Okay. Well, we're coming to that time where I want you to share anything as we wrap up that would be helpful to our viewing audience from your perspective as a judge, whether it's in enlightening ourselves or better preparing ourselves for legal matters, just from your perspective, or how courts operate. As we wrap up, what would you like to leave with us and share?
The most important thing that I would like to leave with your audience is that judges do matter. What judges do impact your lives greatly. And you should take as much interest and as much concern in the selection or the election of your judges in each of your states as much as possible. The judges in your state, or federal judges for that matter, federal judges, like the Supreme Court, once appointed, they are appointed for life. Think about all of those issues that will be decided in the next 30, 40 years for the folks who are already on the Supreme Court. I just can't stress enough that every election is important, not just presidential elections, but every election, primary elections, general elections. Yes, we do have an election every year. It's just not every 4 years. And think about everyone on the ballot, and not just presidents or governors or mayors. Just think about everyone on your ballot, how that person, once elected, will impact their life. Judges will impact their life.
Very good. Well, I certainly want to appreciate you, Judge Logan, for taking the time to give us enlightenment in terms of how our judicial systems is structured and insight on how the courts operate. This has been helpful personally to me as well as to our viewing audience. I'm appreciative of your time to have you come and speak. It's not often that we're sitting in front of a judge and having that opportunity to dialogue and to understand more about and the role, and you take an oath as you have indicated. I'm sure there's other professions, that are required to do that. And so this has been very helpful. And I thank you for dispelling the myth of appointed judges are not there to fight just as hard as paying a lawyer, or not as equipped or have the expertise. So I appreciate all of the information that you have shared with us tonight. thank you once again, and I certainly appreciate the extensive expertise and background that you bring to the table. And certainly, I just want to say thanks, and I'm sure that our viewing audience have appreciated your knowledge and expertise on tonight. As I wrap up, I do want to mention, because on next Sunday, and I hope that you have the time, we have an attorney that's going to be presenting and helping us understand as an entrepreneur for small business. She has an experience as being in the court system, and is attorney Barbara Littles. Is a dynamic woman of God, as well as an attorney that is doing great things. She is have gone through, I know you know Maxwell, I'm trying to think of his first name right now off the top, his leadership program, and doing great things. So I want to encourage our viewing audience to join us next Sunday at 7 o'clock, especially if you are in business or know someone that's running a small business. She's insightful and willing to share, just as you were tonight. So here on the Dwelling Place this month, we've had wonderful guest speakers. And on Thursday of this week, I've had people mentioning our various presenters and how it's been a blessing. And so I want to encourage our viewing audience to come on back on Thursday. This Thursday, we have Tiffany Jones, who's going to share with us about preparing for buying your first home or even second home and getting your home ready for sale. As we look 2 months down the road, I understand the spring and the interest rate are lower than they have been in umpteen years. So you want to get your pad and pencil ready for next Thursday as we bring back Tiffany Jones, seasoned realtor and experienced accountant as well. Last 2 weeks ago, someone mentioned to me today, they said, I really did enjoy the young lady that talked about getting our finance in order. So now we've addressed our legal business, and we're coming back to have someone to share with us in reference with our small business. So we're wrapping up the month and looking forward to March. As we approach March, we're looking at talking about women issue, because it's Women History Month, and some dynamic dialogue there. Well, God bless you, Deirdre. We will personally reach out to you soon, and thank you for this opportunity to share tonight. If you have a last word, something you want to leave with our audience, feel free to do that. If there's anything that I didn't mention that you want to share, I want to give you that opportunity to close us out with a last comment.
Just thank you, Evangelist, for the opportunity to speak. I've enjoyed my time with you tonight, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And God bless to you and to our audience. God bless you at this time. We hope that you will join us on Thursday. And until we meet again, God bless each and every one of you.